Welcome. I guess we're at about effectively the halfway point of the legislative session. And I'll mention a few different things and then can open it up for questions. Like on the one hand, you look at it, there's about 300 more bills introduced this session at this point than 2017 session as a comparator. Indeed, almost as many bills have already been introduced this session as was introduced for the entirety of the 2017 session. Yet there's also fewer bills to my desk to date. 17 legislative session by transmittal deadline, 768 bills were introduced, 1,042 to date. Number of bills that I've received is 59, and at this point, last session, there's about 76 today. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, certainly, and I don't think that that's, the bodies upstairs recognize that as well. Mentioned a couple of different things, one of which is certainly on the budget, that the budget goes to the full appropriations committee starting next Thursday. There are things that we need to take a real close look at and concerning. I mean, if the budget that is going to committee was passed today, as but one example, I think there'd be a requirement to cut 117 bodies from the Department of Public Health and Human Services. At the same time that we hear many people around the state, and indeed those in the legislature, saying that we need to ensure that we're not taking any steps back from what happened during the 2017 legislative session. You also see that even outside of House Bill 2, that there are any number of bills that are still coming along that have substantial appropriation costs. So to date, the legislature's looked at both the spending side and at times proposing these bills that would increase spending beyond what our proposed budget had, yet not quite, and not yet looking at the revenue side. We do have some proposals that will be introduced after transmittal that I've talked about with this group at times of ways that we could increase revenues in a reasonable way. There's certainly some legislators that have said any increase in revenues is dead on arrival, but I think that taking that sort of frame would certainly do a disservice to Montanans if we're going to take out half of the equation, the discussion. The half being, well, we want to spend more in some areas, but we're still not figuring out a way to actually, bless you, to address that spending. And also, we still, as I said at the start, we need to figure out a way to leave a healthy Indian Fund reserve, as I proposed, leaving about $300 million at the end. Certainly we have additional work to do in healthcare and Medicaid expansion. Don't think that there's doubt from either side of the aisle, by and large, of the need to get this thing done. And both the economic gains and the health gains, that if we walked out after the second half of this legislative session, did not get it done, we'd kiss those gains goodbye. I'm optimistic that we'll remove the sunset. At least the draft proposals introduced so far by Republicans would fundamentally change that bipartisan program that we have, and what analyses have been done of those. I would say not only does it cost more to administer than provide the benefits, but also significant gains or reductions of access to health care. So at the end of the day, for the second half, we're certainly going to have to come together and find a solution that's best for the state and for all Montanans. Of the 59 bills that I've signed to date, probably the most significant has been education funding bill, Representative Grubbs' bill, which we just got to we did a signing ceremony yesterday afternoon. I'm glad that the Education Committee Democrats and Republicans and those advocating and working on behalf of our schools got that to me early on. It represents, just even with inflationary adjustments, an increased investment of $77 million over the next biennium, next 2 years in our K-12 system. Now, I think there's still work to be done. I think that including special education inflationary adjustment is just something that Montanans have expected for a long time. I think ensuring the Quality Educator Loan Repayment Program, which was in House Bill 225, which will help our rural communities, needs to get done. And I also think that the investments, bipartisan investment that we made in preschool last time, that we've seen the results, needs to get done as well. House Bill 225, Representative Schreiner's bill, I think is still sitting in committee, House Education as well as others. So we have more work to do in education as well. In higher education funding, do appreciate that at least the subcommittee to date has accepted or concurred with my request for a tuition freeze and also some need-based aid. We proposed $5 million with a match from the foundations of $5 million. To date, it's at $2 million. Also pleased that they supported funding for high-step preparation at our tribal colleges. Another area that we still have much more work to do on, of course, is infrastructure. It's always more than willing to work with Democrats and Republicans to figure out the best way to get this done. Proposal that we put together with cash and bonding, I think priority projects would also create nearly 2,000 jobs, provide for immediate infrastructure needs, and address areas urban and rural. There's still a lot more discussion out there, but in that discussion, I want to make sure that what we don't do is just kick the can down the road and not get anything meaningfully done this session. So as often happens, it seems every year they're like, we'll grade the legislature. And it's not my job to grade, certainly the people of Montanans, but I think even the legislature would give, say at the halfway point, it'd be hard to give a grade, it's incomplete because we still have a lot more work to do in the second half. With that, open it up.
So, Governor, you mentioned the revenue bills of yours which have not been introduced, and of course Republican leaders are adamantly saying we have to live within our means. What's the argument that you're going to make that's going to change their minds in any way?
Well, I think that we have to decide what our means are, right? That ultimately Montanans get the government that we're willing to fund and that we deserve. So that, you know, look, on the one hand, we say no fee increases even. Just signed a bill, the first fee increase, revenue increasing bill that I signed was today that came from the insurance commissioner's office. You know, it was not a big increase at all, but, and I think like literally $2,550 for the biennium. But just as an example, you know, look, we've got to fund the government that folks expect, and we got to leave money in the bank at the end to ensure that they're not coming back as soon as we send them home. And there are many Republican proposals that propose to spend money beyond what my base budget even was. So we got to sort that out. And I just hope that, look, we can't just get rid of one side of the equation. Meaning that an investment license fee that hasn't been raised since 1982, that even representatives of the investment advisory community say would make a lot of sense. You know, I expect and hope that we'll come together and say, we want to make sure that government's providing the services Montanans expect, that's doing things like funding the additional $77 million in our K-12 system. The Democrats and Republicans were happy to come together to say that We need to be putting this money out in our school districts, and I think we still have a long way to go.
Do you have any comment on Representative Bishop's House Bill 547, which came through the Equal Pay for Equal Work Task Force?
They're excited, right? Yeah, I mean, it still has ways to go. Is it on the floor today?
It's on third reading today.
Third reading, yeah. Like, this is one of these where, look, it's still the fact that if you're in college or in high school, whether you're male or female is but one example, saying that, we're still in a place where women are making on average 73 cents on the dollar to men. Notwithstanding the fact we're over 50 years past when John F. Kennedy signed an Equal Pay Act, that there's more that can be done. And this commission has done good work along the way, but it was so great to see. Again, Democrats and Republicans come together to recognize some of the barriers to getting rid of that pay disparity.
So if this passes, what do you see as the next step in reducing that pay gap?
Well, first I'd like to see it pass. And I think that the commission continues to work both on areas within government and outside of government. I mean, within government, we've taken significant steps in even saying, not just through our Department of Labor and Industry, but also through our university systems. Like, how do we prepare people to interview? Because there are certain gender biases in just interviewing. When we did our overall statewide pay audit of state government, and we've had more and more private employers effectively agreeing to the same principles that were in Representative Bishop's Act. So it's another one of these challenges that we've dealt with for 60 years, so it's not going to be solved overnight, but certainly pleased with the steps that have been taken.
Thank you.
So what do you think about the philosophical approach that's being taken with infrastructure? I mean, it seems to be sort of creating a template for future sessions. I mean, has it always been that way, or is this some kind of new approach, or what's your thought?
And specifically like Representative Moore's bill?
Yes.
And I think that a couple people were asking about it. I mean, I think that ultimately we need to see the entirety of the overall proposals before I can really ascribe or sign on to any of it. Because I think the thought of building a long-term structure, yet not dealing with the immediate needs that we have today, would be a bit short-sighted. But both my budget office, as well as my policy folks and others, have been working with the legislature and trying to say, what's this overall framework? But just I guess, structural proposal without any projects that are going to be funded would be a bit problematic to me.
So you're essentially waiting for the project list, the Republican bonding bill?
What's that?
Essentially interested in seeing what bonding projects the Republicans are interested in?
Yeah, look, they're talking about a number of different bills, and I don't think that we can look at any of these bills in isolation.
Yeah. What do you think about the philosophical approach, though, the idea of having a general obligation debt cap? Do you think that's the right way to manage that issue?
I think it is a way to manage that issue, and I think that, that's where I guess before I go too deep into it, or too deep into even the first bill that's come through, Representative Moore's, or at least past one house, I want to see what the overall package is. Because the implications, I guess, of what is being proposed will have impact long beyond my time in office. So both want to look at what's going to happen while I get to serve in this office, and what are the implications long term. Like, on the one hand, the notion that we should be investing in everything from O&M and maintenance and having a predictable supply of money makes a heck of a lot of sense. But by the same token, we got to make sure we're doing it in a way that's funding the expectations of government.
What do you think about the idea of capping this like that? Absent anything else, do you think that?
I think I have to take a look at it all. I mean, I'm not going to go any further than where I am on that.
And when you say that these shouldn't be looked in isolation, does that mean you think that any bonding for future, I guess, immediate projects should be looped into one piece of legislation with this framework?
One more time on. Well, I think that they're proposing different bills. right? And I'd like to see the whole package not in isolation.
So separate bills for separate projects, but
Not for individual projects by any means. It's difficult enough trying to find, the suite of projects that we could have. And when I say projects, I'm not just talking about building. I'm talking about funding base water and sewer in communities that are unable to pay for their own funding. I mean, that's why I think a more comprehensive infrastructure bill overall makes greater sense, because then everybody's giving some, and presumably everybody's getting some.
It looks like this session we're going to see the Heritage Center broken out again into a similar proposal from what we saw in 17. Do you think it makes sense to break out a project like that that's been high profile and sort of stalled the deal before?
Well, I want to see where we go before I'm sort of, handicapping or betting it all, and I don't think that handicapping or suggesting this would be the best approach. Look, I think that, as I said in the State of the State, I mean, we have obligations, including to the Heritage Center. And not just obligations, if you will, we also have opportunities. And that does a heck of a lot more than just impacts one community. So I'm hopeful that, I look at, when we talk about overall infrastructure, if it's broken into 2 bills, if it's broken into a dozen bills, I'm hopeful that the legislature is saying, what's this overall package that we're trying to accomplish? And the more that view and vision can be afforded to me from where I sit, and that view and vision can be afforded to Montanans across the state, I think it affords a greater opportunity for success in infrastructure this session.
So when we first sat down, we were talking about the health department's budget and those positions that were removed because they've been vacant for a year or more. Have you talked to the health department?
Is that correct that all of them have been vacant? The 117 have been vacant?
They have been vacant, yeah. They were held open to meet vacancies they can start.
Have you talked with the department about their reaction to that? Because they didn't talk to the committee about, the committee sought feedback and they didn't get.
Yeah, I think, so as we go into full committee, I mean, we've had this interesting dynamic of, on the one hand, that typically session after session says, you have to have vacancy savings, right? So you can't fill positions, you have to hit certain targets. Yet by the same token then, saying, all right, then we're gonna get rid of all these positions. I mean, it's, if the legislature ultimately does not want certain programs to exist, certain functions of government, then ultimately identify, say, we shouldn't be doing this, as opposed to sort of the death by 1,000 cuts.
Governor, I just want to go back to revenue briefly.
No.
Briefly.
You had a first chance. Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
But, of course, you talk back and forth in the media, the two sides of the state of their case. I'm just wondering if you or members of your team have talked directly to any of the Republican leaders or members of the Republican caucus about revenue and whether you sense any give there if you've done that.
Well, I hope that there's give, and yes, I mean, we've been speaking to people already, but also the bills haven't been introduced yet. So part of it is, look, at the halfway point, as we start to look at where both money proposals to spend additional dollars and what we will need walking out of this. I mean, it's not any, I think, great surprise that it takes a little while for the legislature and everybody to get to that point, but as those bills are introduced, we'll be having more and more conversations with legislators, Democrats and Republicans.
Can I ask you about Medicaid expansion?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't your office propose a bill draft to continue?
Why didn't we?
I guess why on the policy side didn't your office kind of?
Well, Cafera's bill is doing that. So why didn't we do it at the request of?
I guess why didn't you take the lead on that? Because I think.
Well,
Cafera's bill was not associated with garages?
Oh, I think that the first day that it came out, we said, this is great. And from that perspective, whether it's introduced at my request or working with the legislators, no, I think we got to get this done, right? But to be clear, haven't been shying away from, Cafera's bill lifts the sunset. It provides, you know, this was an incredible bipartisan model coming out of our 2015 legislative session, that as we're looking at this in 2019, we should be saying, how do we build upon this, not how do we tear it down?
And what do you think about some Republicans' calls for another sunset to put whatever changes could possibly be in place to in 4 years again kind of come back and maybe rework those?
Well, I mean, I'll have to see both, because I haven't even heard if another sunset would be 2 years or 4 years or what have you. There are always ways to be continuing to improve the system without the sunsets. You know, if you want to add on to it, you can certainly make amendments to any bill, any time. So it's not one where, you know, I've taken a firm, oh no, I would never allow another sunset on a bill. But I think we just got to, what are we trying to accomplish here? And we'll see where the rest of this shakes out.
The coal strip, looking at that.
Yeah, I think that got to take a, you know, it's still sort of in process, and some of my staff have spoken to folks, but want to take a close look at where it comes out.
Talking about 278.
Well, there's a couple of them. I assume you're talking about 278, right?
What do you think about just the idea of doing something to kind of save coal strips?
Well, it's got I mean, the idea, conceptually, there's all kinds of good things. I mean, I want to see where this goes through the process a little bit more before I'm weighing in on whether I think it's a good or bad idea.
Senate Bill 71, carried by Olszewski, one of the priority bills from Matt Rosendale's office. The majority leader, or sorry, the minority leader voted on third reading in the House. When the Senate, Democrats were more opposing it. Do you have a position on that?
I haven't looked at it yet. I mean, we got 83 to our desk right now, Senator Fitzpatrick's, which I think both PBM, pharmacy benefit managers, and community pharmacists were pretty excited about. As a general perspective, the notion that we're taking steps to address healthcare costs and to try to make sure that healthcare, hopefully, will be taking steps to make sure it remains accessible but also affordable. All that much better. But I honestly haven't dug in yet on 71.
As your office, are you having conversations with pharmacy benefit managers about possible regulation of their issue?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
I
question.
guess
Have I or other members of my office been having discussions with pharmacy benefit managers about the possibilities of regulating their industry? I mean, we proposed a bill on
We proposed.
PBM regulation, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming we told folks.
I think Jess has had conversations with various lobbyists who represent the groups.
Yeah.
Has your office done anything to oppose Trump's emergency order to build the wall?
Look, from my perspective, I am concerned about the precedent that invoking the National Emergencies Act could have, not just in this instance, but in other instances. We're not part of the litigation. Having served as both Attorney General and as now Governor, I recognize the power and authority of the Attorney General, and I think that to the extent that people are concerned that our state isn't part of challenging the use of the National Emergency Act for that, that's a question that has to be raised to the AG. Now I'm continuing to look at, because there's also even beyond, if you look at the 4-page Emergencies Act, I mean, beyond just is the state of Montana involved in litigation, there's obligations that potentially could be invoked dealing with federalizing the National Guard. Something directly under me and not the AG's office. And had some discussions about that during National Gun Association meeting. And what a concerning precedent that that would set. So as this thing rolls out, I mean, look, you're seeing congressional action, you're seeing legal action. As this rolls out, I'll continue to, if it impacts our state, we'll take a keen eye, and if action needs to be taken, we'll do so. But that's, I think, about where it sits right now.
So been to Iowa lately, going to Iowa anytime soon?
Haven't been there lately. I actually go there Monday. Go there as National Gun Association chairman. We've had regional workshops. The first one was in Pennsylvania. Second one was in Las Vegas. This one will be with myself, Republican governor of Iowa. I think my NGA co-chair, Governor Hogan, will be there as well for a few days.
I guess the other question is, does your PAC have any staff in that?
There's, I guess, is my PAC funding anyone?
Yes.
My PAC does have paying one individual, I think.
And I don't, for how long?
I don't know. I mean, you could have a question outside of the legislative transmittal. We can hook you up with somebody that works for the PAC.
Okay.
Anything else?
I guess the Wendigo thing, as far as how that was handled, was that a proper response, the distributing of the committee chairmanship?
To tell the truth, I mean, if you come back to me, I'm not even sure what
Okay.
you're talking about.
All right.
Great. Thank you.